Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. And we're sounding the master alarm today with our friend, Mr. Nick Thomas. Hello,
Oh,
Nick.
how you doing? Good to see you.
Well, great to see you. We've had a busy month, of course, here at the museum
hmm
with all that's going on. We missed you out. I have missed you personally out there at the Space Center, but of course, Nick, you're in your 38th year now.
Yeah, approaching 38th year.
Been an educator out to Space Center, and you go out there, you want to see the astronaut encounter, one of the great programs Delaware North's doing there. Let's give them some love there. Uh, Twice a day, you can hear an
hmm
astronaut give a talk,
Yeah,
and then go get an autograph or a photograph with
yeah.
them, Nick. And that there's a lot more behind the scenes too. You do with them.
No other place in the world does what we do, and that's to say that you can come there twice a day, 7 days a week, and actually experience the stories of a veteran astronaut, ask questions, and we're very proud of that. We've got a very loyal following, as evidenced by yourself and Marty and several of our members of the Space
Yeah,
Task
big
Group who
astronaut group,
come by
astronaut
here.
autograph group out there that
And
love collecting them.
the general public is really enjoying it. They love hearing the stories and asking the questions. The astronauts themselves love the feedback, and they love the chance to go forward and to tell the story in depth to the people who
Mhm.
are so very interested in it, invested in it in more ways than one. So it's a program that we've been very, very proud of. And a fellow that we're going to be talking about in a little while was very instrumental in putting that program together. We're going to
Mhm.
talk about that in a second.
Yes, we're going to hear Nick's tribute to his friend, Mr. John McBride, one of the really uh, people behind the scenes
Mm.
of the early shuttle era, as well as the warm fuzzy that you're talking about at
Yeah,
that Space Center out there. He was the face of this
yeah.
program. John McBride was passed away about 3 weeks ago, a month ago. They had his wake in his home state of West Virginia over the weekend, and you can look that up online up there. And that's our segue that we lost our leader, Karen Conklin. And it was just so sad that the last time you saw her, you didn't know
So
that was going to be
sudden,
the last time.
so sudden.
And she died of lung cancer after about a 3-month battle. And it's not the same around the museum. Her 2 decades of influence will be celebrated at the North Brevard Funeral Home Saturday at 2 o'clock, and it will be on. I know so many of you want to watch that because I'll bet we've got 10 watchers today that have met her around
Yeah,
the world,
yeah.
literally. And So we're going to celebrate this sweet lady's life. She died at age 65. It will be on live, is what I'm trying to spit out through the funeral home. And those of you locally that come, we will have a reception here at the museum for her. The museum will be closed in her honor Saturday, August 31st. And then we'll also be closed Labor Day the following Monday. But God bless you, Karen. I think about her every day. I was inspired by one of our, had a shower thought yesterday. We always traded our shower thoughts. Mark, I was
Yeah.
thinking about this. She came up with the name Stay Curious,
Uh-huh.
shampooing her hair,
Okay.
she said. And
Very warm, very nice individual. I see her every time that I came here, and she always made a point of coming by the studio and saying hello, how's it going, and so
mhm.
forth. So yeah, we are going to miss her. She's a wonderful lady, and we're going to miss her a lot.
God bless her family, her husband Mark, and everybody. And we will be celebrating her life on Saturday.
hmm
So uh, here's our heroes. What more can you say? We're both baby boomers. What's the difference between me and this guy is he actually got to break bread with probably every one of them. Did you eat with every one of the Mercury
I've
heroes?
known out of the Mercury 7, I've known six of them, and three of them were close friends.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I met John Glenn when he was senator, photographing him,
hmm
putting myself through college with a Nikon camera and Tri-X film, and you know, saw him at a couple other events. But what a guy he was!
Was
Just
out with Fred Gregory last night, and we swapped a couple of John Glenn stories.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's on the side out there at the Astronaut Hall of Fame building there. I love that. And I'm sure you do too. And that was a day when I was walking out, and boy, the light was just right.
Yeah,
And I said,
incredible the way that
and
art is so
yeah,
lifelike, and that's not an easy thing to accomplish a representation and relief like that. But it is just beautiful, and the artist did such a good job. And you got some good beta angles on that piece of art.
Well, we're going to have fun with Nick today. We're going to talk about, first, we're going to share not so much fun, the great John McBride, and I'm going to turn Nick
Well,
loose.
I think John would tell you that it's fun because his is a fun story.
Good,
Yeah.
good. And I've got one story to share of an event I saw him at, talking about the late John Young. And then Nick's going to talk about Apollo 13, the movie, and Marooned. And I'm just going to kind of add some of the color to it of the box office.
I want to very quickly thank Dave Stange for coming up with this idea the last time we were online. And Dave had the idea, why don't you all talk about space movies? And after we went down, we sat around and talked about it. Said, that's a good idea, and there are a lot of them out there we can talk about. So I want to announce at this time that Dave is now officially an associate producer of Stay Curious.
There you
And
go.
associate producer, as defined in Hollywood, is thanks for the idea, and you're not getting paid.
And Dave is watching with his granddaughter, Mia.
Hello, Dave.
Hi, Mia. She's about 1 year old, little beautiful squishy there that he's babysitting, and she loves hearing Grandpa's name up there, Mia. And,
Well, thank
and
you.
Mark is saying hi to you, honey. So
And thank you again, Dave. I think you're going to like what we've come up with this week.
yeah, and we're gonna trade off on this. I mean, we could have had a whole show. You guys missed a whole show of what we talked about before when we went live here. Let me push up my. I'm going to find that while you're talking here in a minute. There we go. I found the right button to push so I can follow your comments there. Everybody watching. Gary Gerald, he's in Collins, Georgia, just getting off his tractor there. Says, good to see Nick today. They got about a foot of water there.
Oh,
and it was,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
Vidalia onions weren't
He's
planted
okay?
yet, so
Oh,
they're
okay.
okay.
Good show.
Dean Babcock says, hi, everyone. Robert Law, hello from Scotland. Planning to come back next year. We miss you. Carlton Bailey's getting over being sick. He's down with
CB.
COVID.
Oh,
yeah.
boy. Well,
And
get
he had
well
his
soon.
birthday Friday also.
Happy birthday, CB.
So that's why you haven't seen him out there.
Yeah.
Tommy Usiak says he's on the road today and listening on the car.
Good show.
Thank you, Tommy. And Doug Forrest in California says hello all.
Excellent.
So, Nick, I'm going to turn Nick loose here on his remembrance. I know you were a great friend with John McBride.
Yeah.
Not sure clearly if he was your boss is the
Yeah.
astronaut encounter.
Well, John and I first met in 2000 when he came on board at the Visitors Complex. Now, at the time, you might remember they were talking about the idea of, at the end of the shuttle program, that orbiters were going to be dispersed to KSC, JSC, and Smithsonian Institution.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was decided, we're going to go ahead and put them up for open bid. So John is brought on board with the hope that he can, kind of counsel Delaware North on how to approach this thing. And John basically told Delaware North, don't think you can get one of these things by divine right. You're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to put forward a hell of a design, a hell of a concept, and you're going to have to earn this. So Delaware North put their shoulder to the wheel, and they came up with a concept that we see out there now. And I think that Atlantis out there on display is a big part of John McBride's legacy because he was so instrumental in getting that to us. He was then put in charge of the astronaut encounter program as I came into it. So he served as my boss, my mentor, and he taught me the importance of what we call cockpit resource management.
Cockpit resource management.
And that's
okay.
basically, as John said, it's better to have two sets of eyes on a problem than just one. And he and I flew wing off of each other on several occasions.
Awesome.
And I learned so much from him as to program management, which he had a degree in, by the way, and basically how to put one of these programs together and how to sustain it. So he was very much a mentor for me in that regard.
Well, of course, Nick doesn't need any notes to talk about what he's talking about today, and I love that about you, Nick. By the way, that is just one of the greatest publicity pictures
Oh, yeah,
ever for
yeah.
Kennedy Space
Well,
Center
that says it
Visitor
all about
Complex.
John and his commitment to education and to the future and to the young people. Because in John's mind, it was important not just to educate these young people, but to inspire them and make them realize how important it was to be a part of something larger than yourself.
Hmm.
He stressed that all the time when he was talking to the young people. And by God, I'm convinced that the first people who step on Mars in the future, one of them is going to be able to say, "Hey, I saw that guy at the visitors complex."
6'2" was he?
Yeah, yeah.
And one of
That's
the
why they
largest.
that's why they called him Big John.
Tell everybody a little bit about him, the astronaut. Give us his thumbnail of his career. I just want to mention I'm always impressed with the one-time pilots who become a commander, and he was destined to be one of those.
Now he was a shuttle pilot, and he was a pilot on STS-41G. He was scheduled to be a commander on the first Astro mission, but after Challenger, John was called to serve in Washington, D.C. as a liaison with Congress, NASA's liaison with Congress, which he did for, I believe, about 2 years. And during that time, he realized that between what he was doing in D.C. and the delay in how long it was going to take to get Astro 1 back onto the manifest was just going to be too long. So he decided at that time to retire from NASA. But as I say, went on to do a lot of great things, particularly with us over at the visitors complex. But all around the world, John went. People might not know, John went all around the world talking to students, talking to citizens, taking part in Association for Space Explorers all around the world. And I can remember one year when John went on a speaking tour in Japan, and by God, he did 4 islands in 3 days. I mean, the guy was a monster. He really, really was. But that's how much he believed in his mission in inspiring the young people, informing the older people of what the program had done, what the program was capable of doing, and why the program was important to them on an individual basis. So he had a lot of means of inspiration there for people. Now, John was a multifaceted person. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, carrier pilot, naval aviator, test pilot, and then, of course, on to being an astronaut. And you take a person like that who is so multifaceted and you try to find a common thread, and it's not easy, but I think if the people out there want to get kind of a snapshot, and a snapshot only, of what John's soul was, go to YouTube and search Captain Kirk, Risk is Our Business, and watch that speech. That's Big John.
Huh.
Also, Captain Kirk, All I Ask is a Tall Ship. That speech by William Shatner. That's also Big John.
Okay.
And I'll let our friends out there go to those videos and look at them and
Yeah, you send
see
those to
for
me.
them-
I'll
see
share
for
them on our
themselves.
Facebook
Yeah.
there,
yeah,
Nick.
absolutely.
You talk about him being in Japan and so forth. That's a tall order for eating sushi from a guy from West Virginia. So proud of his mountain heritage, wasn't he?
absolutely, absolutely. He was
He would get.
he was a good friend of Senator Joe Manchin. He had Joe over at the Space Center one day. We had a chance to talk in the office, and as I understand, Senator Manchin spoke at his memorial service in West Virginia. So John was well known and well loved among the people of West Virginia.
Ran for governor unsuccessfully,
governor,
though, but
yeah.
that got him out there in front of everybody.
He also had touch with a number of celebrities in his time. John was a golfer, and he was in a he was in a celebrity pro celebrity tournament, I guess they call it. And one of the other celebrities in the tournament was Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun series.
Yeah.
And he and John apparently got along very well because they had similar senses of humor.
Forbidden Planet too, a
Yeah.
movie that I'm gonna do one time on our movie niche show here.
And I think if John had what I'll call a spirit animal among the original 7 Mercury astronauts, it would have been Wally Schirra.
Oh, wow.
Because like Wally, he was a Navy fighter pilot and test pilot, very dedicated, very hard-nosed when he came to work. But when it came to fun, he had no qualms there either. He came from the time where astronauts were known for working hard and driving fast.
There you go.
Yeah,
He had him a nice Corvette too. We're going to
he
see here.
did.
Just
He
say.
sure did.
Well, you brought a little photo album here with
Yeah.
us. Anything else you want to say about John's career there?
Well, I
that
will
people need to know about?
as we're going through
All right.
these images. Here's John with Wendy Lawrence.
Now,
Back,
too short
back in
and
the-
too tall there, basically.
back in the days when we were doing Dine With, and we had a young lady there who came in her astronaut outfit, and she was just so irresistible. She loved the space program, so I took this picture of the three of them together. Let's go on to the
Yeah,
to the
we'll see
next
Wendy
one.
coming back till this fall, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
Wendy's a regular out there. I know you know her quite well. We did a tribute. I meant to send you to her dad. And
Oh
her
yeah,
birthday. I don't
Admiral
know.
Lawrence, Admiral Bill Lawrence.
And,
you
oh my
bet.
God, that was.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote something about her dad and the
Yeah, I
whole
read
story
that.
about her
Yeah,
dad.
it was beautiful.
Oh,
It
that
really
that
was.
that was something else. How
Just
they bonded
breathtaking. Yeah.
there.
Here's John with Susan Kilrain and our friend Don Thomas. Of course, John and Susan, both naval aviators, carrier pilots, and he always made the effort to get over to the office to speak to whoever the astronaut on duty was, and to check him in and say, hey, it's good to see you, and sit down and swap a few sea stories, which John could do with the best of them.
You haven't said hi to Marty Winkel, my co-producer
Oh, yeah.
here. We're doing episode 1119 today,
Oh,
Nick,
boy.
believe it or not. Couldn't do it without Marty, but
Mhm.
what made me think about you, Marty, my friend there, was he and I were both very surprised in a positive way what a warm person Susan Kilran was and is, because as a pilot and commander, they're kind of usually in a lane at times, but she's something else.
she
and
was with
wrote
a-
a kid's book. We can't get more of her.
She was with a group of people recently, and it was like, God, she's just so warm and friendly, and what she is. I think a book that would be a natural for her would be to write about her time in the space program in parallel with her family,
Yeah.
because she is so family oriented, and she's had the privilege of taking those kids with her husband Colin all around the world to see all sorts of things. Those kids have experienced, I think, the greatest education you possibly could, and Susan has been just such a big part of that, and she's one of our favorites over at the visitors complex, talking to the people and signing autographs and meeting the kids. She loves working with the kids, and so
Definitely
always
could have
enjoy-
been.
we always enjoy having her come by. And of course, Don Thomas, who's in and out of the place all the time. He comes by and does a number of these VIP and corporate events and so forth. So he's very busy over there too.
Susan would have been a commander.
Mhm.
She said, "I got kids to raise, and my husband's
Yeah.
a Navy SEAL."
Yep.
And
Too much danger in the
too
family.
much going on.
Yeah.
But Don, of course, a Buckeye, and
Mhm.
they were together on the repeat mission there, 83 and 94, and
Right.
and then he was on 70, the Woodpecker mission. And we'll be seeing him in the museum next Monday, as he will be teaching a group from Japan here
Yeah.
in Florida, Japan. So there.
John and I at one of the the induction ceremonies at the Astronaut Hall of Fame. John, as I said, had any wealth, a great wealth of sea stories to share. And one of my favorites was one time during Vietnam, he was taking off the aircraft carrier. And just before the aircraft completed the stroke off the deck, the left engine ingested a piece of foreign object debris and shut down. So he comes off that carrier, and he's only got one engine on an F-4 Phantom that's fully loaded for combat. So as he clears the deck, that F-4, and remember, he's got a guy in the back seat with him too, that F-4 coming closer and closer and closer and closer to the water. Now, finally, he got into what we call ground effect, and you can have that on the water as well as on the land. But the ground effect basically cushions you, and the ground effect is about as high as the wingspan of your airplane. So he gets into ground effect, and that gives him a chance to stabilize, add power, and then come around and land back on the boat. Because that foreign object debris also blew his hydraulics, I think it was, and he wasn't able to eject any of his stores. So he
Oh,
had everything
gosh.
loaded down on that F4J, and he was headed toward the water. But again, it was his skill that brought him back to to the deck and to fly another day.
One of those events that gets you into the astronaut corps. I'm going to guess you were the MC there because you don't have a name tag.
No, I was a participant. I was there as
Okay.
a participant with the guys, and later on that night, I had a chance to talk to Bob Crippen after a number of these student honorees had discussed their projects, the things that they were studying for their scholarship. And I asked Cripp, I said, what do you think of these students? And Cripp said, boy, I'm glad I wasn't going to school with them. He said, they would have buried me. They're so brilliant. And every astronaut will tell you that every succeeding generation that's come along in this business has been better, faster, smarter. And so somewhere along the line, we're doing the right thing, and we're attracting some very good young people
And
into
they're
this
standing
program.
on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely,
there.
they realize that too. John
Hoot.
with one of his best friends, Hoot Gibson. They're in the office, and Hoot, of course, and John. When you sit down with those guys, you know you're going to be listening to sea stories for days. And John, as I say, was always very diligent about coming by and making sure that everything was going well for the astronaut on duty, that he had everything he needed, that I was treating them well, and
Right.
wasn't running them around too hard. But yeah, Hoot and John were very close friends.
So I got flashed in my mind that you may have had the flu or something. John ever pinch hit and go up there and do the honors
John,
up on the stage
John
and
kept
say,
his John, when he was head of the program, John still kept on. John was a regular part of the schedule. He'd be on the schedule, say, every other month.
okay.
Come there and do shows. If he had to pinch hit, he would, but he made certain to keep himself in the program so he could understand what his guys were going through and what they needed. So about every other month, John would take about a 4 or 5 day assignment, and we'd work together. And God, I can remember we were doing a show, and I had just done about a 2-week stretch with John. And we switched the next week over to John Blaha. So I got up there and I'm reading Blaha's intro and all of his accomplishments, et cetera, and I got to the intro and I said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, astronaut John McBlaha.
McBlaha.
So that's how close they were together. But yeah, John, like I said, made a point of staying close to the AE program so he knew what his guys needed.
Well, we'll say happy 82nd birthday today, August 26th, to Mr. John Blaha.
Yeah.
Is 82, and Kay Hire is 65 today.
Very good.
Wished her welcome to senior life.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have John's email, but I meant to send you that because I know John was really in the queue there for many years.
Long time. He was a mainstay for
But he hit 80 and he says, I got to slow down. And,
yeah.
But
I got grandkids and dogs I got to raise.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Let's see here. We got, we'll go forward there. Another group there.
Yeah, Michael Good, Bueno, and again, Wendy Lawrence with us.
Bueno,
and again,
Hubble telescope.
Yep.
Spacewalker.
And again, John coming by to make sure everybody has what they need. And I think on this day, Wendy was the duty astronaut, and John was bringing Bueno around to acquaint him with the operation, where he'd be appearing with us in the weeks ahead.
Let's see. I wonder where that.
This is one of my favorite pictures that I got to take. We had a special dine with, and the dine with was bought up by the guy who owned the Dallas Cowboys. And one of his guests that he brought
Jones?
Jerry Jones, I guess that was it, yeah. And one of the guests that he brought with him was Neil Armstrong. And of course, you don't want to, bother Neil with autographs and pictures and so forth, but by God, this was such a special thing. And so John said, what do you think? I said, Jesus, John, all he can do is ask. So he went over and he talked to Neil, and Neil said, yeah, sure. So he came over and we took this picture of him, and they were fraternity brothers. They were both in the same fraternity, not at the same time, but they were members of that same fraternity. And there was a special, I think John felt a very special kinship with Neil. So this is
a nice picture.
One of my favorite pictures.
Oh, look at Neil and just looking great there. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one I took was underexposed, and then I did it the second time and I got it right.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think today's the anniversary of him passing away.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And we won't have to talk about that, but God bless him. the right guy, right?
Right
for
guy at the right time, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
we managed to do that in history, whether it's
Yeah.
Lindbergh or Neil Armstrong, just the right people
Yeah.
come along and step
Amelia
up to the
Earhart,
uh,
Sally Ride.
Sally
I
Ride.
mean,
Yeah,
she's,
yeah.
yeah,
And
it's a,
Eileen Collins.
yep, Eileen,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
another good one too. The right person to carry the weight of their fame, and all of them are so humble and
Not only up to the job, but able to carry that fame with grace.
yeah,
That's a very important part of it.
yeah,
And
right. I was hearing Sally Ride stories from Mikey Haddad. Our
mhm.
Mikey does it once a month, and he dealt with Sally for a year, and he said Sally Ride had a way of telling somebody that they didn't know what they were talking about, and they had no idea she was telling them that
Well, I
type of
saw
thing.
her do that several
Oh,
times
did
during the
you?
Rogers Commission.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah, that's where it started.
they were out here when we had the Rogers Commission out here for one session, and that's where I met Sally and John Fabian, and I saw Sally and how she operated on that panel, and it was like, I think one engineer, when he was kind of over his skis during his testimony, called her Sally, and then after Sally kind of gently shut him down. The next time around, all the witnesses were calling her Dr.
Dr.
Ride, and
Ride.
Bill Rogers said they don't call you Sally anymore, do they?
That's interesting. We digress with some great stories here from the master, Nick Thomas. Just always so joyful when Nick's around. He's got great stories, good perspective, of course. 4 decades
Yeah.
of being in not just a space geek and lover like me, but living the space program. You grew up in nearby Daytona Beach, and said your dad took you to Apollo
Across
launches
all
and
the
so
Apollo
forth.
launches, yeah.
And got a couple more pictures
Yeah,
here
let's
to
take a look.
share, and then we're going to get to the movies.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Marty.
There's Neil.
Go forward
And,
there.
oh yeah. Now these are a couple of my favorite pictures that I took. This is obviously during a shuttle launch with Big John and Jack Lausma. And when you get a couple of guys like this together to watch a launch, it's indescribable what's happening not only out there on the launch pad with this vehicle taking off, but what's happening is you're standing next to two men who have actually done this.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said that the second most special launch I ever saw was the first launch I saw with people on board that I knew. And that was, I think, the same vibe with these guys, with any veteran astronauts who watch a shuttle launch or a crew-rated launch of any kind. John and I watched the launch of Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley on the first manned flight of the SpaceX. We watched it from John's backyard. And John was just fit to be tied. He was so excited because this was a test flight. These were two test pilots testing a new vehicle. That was John's deal. That was John's excitement. And there's no doubt in my mind that he'd wished that he'd been in the left seat of that spacecraft, because he would have enjoyed taking her through her paces and showing all the things that the vehicle was capable of. And then here we are as the vehicle heads uphill. And again, you just see the look at the look on John's face. I mean, that says it all.
Mm-hmm.
John flew one flight. John flew STS-41G, and we've had other folks come through who have flown 2, 3, 4, and 5 flights and so forth. But I will tell you that I think John got more out of that single flight than some folks got out of 4 and 5. And the reason I say that is whenever John did a presentation and he would speak about seeing the Earth for the first time from the windows, every time he described that view, it was as though it had happened to him just yesterday.
Huh.
It was that well embedded in his mind. It was that so deeply a part of his soul that he never lost that. He never lost that sense of awe and wonder when talking about that view. And more importantly, was able to translate that excitement and awe and wonder to the people that he was talking to. That was a great gift. And I will tell you, not everybody can do that. But John was able, as I say, to bring that experience to life for all, whether he was talking to 500 people or 2. John could bring that experience back to life and transport that person to that time on the flight deck when you're looking through the window and seeing the Earth for the first time. And he was blessed to have that talent, and he appreciated it. He fully understood that he had a responsibility after having this wonderful opportunity of flying in space to come back home and share that in as full a way as possible with people all around the world, and that's what he did. That was his mission, and by God, he lived up to it big time.
We'll miss him for sure. Jack Lausma is 88 years old, actually 22 because he was born on leap day.
That's right. That's right.
And it occurs to me looking at these two titans of the space age that they probably talked a little politics because Jack ran unsuccessfully for Congress.
Yeah. And both of them will tell you that eventually not getting into politics was the greatest thing that ever happened to them.
That's what I was going to say, and tell them why.
Yeah. Because the whole thing, you just see the political thing, 2% of it on the TV where you're waving to the crowds and so forth. But John talked about what a grueling experience it was to run for office. And he told me that he spent 90 to 92% of his time soliciting donations, trying to raise funds.
Yeah,
and it was just a grind, and it was just a miserable way to spend your time, actually. And I think, like I say, once they were not able to get to that office, in hindsight, as happens to a lot of us, something that we think was a loss at the time, we look back and say, yeah, good thing that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I know both John and Jack have told me that firsthand.
Somebody knows what's better for you than
that's
you
right.
sometimes.
You've got another path.
I'm sure you're very well. I know you know Jack Lawson very well. He's been coming there for decades also, and hope he can come back one more time because he is a little bit challenged with dementia. We understand from his family when he was here in November. He was here, and from his son. But he said the same thing to me when I was driving him around. I had the privilege of doing that one of his visits here. And he says all I was going to do was raise money.
Yeah.
He goes there was no legislative to it. That was very minor. It was just night after night of having to get dressed up and raise money.
You were a vessel. You were a fundraiser. You were a cash machine.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. So that's a great picture there. There's
yeah. We're out there. Our orbiter that we had on display many years was being shipped out to another location. It ended up at Johnson Space Center and is now sitting on top of the shuttle carrier aircraft they have on display out there. But John and I decided to go out there, and I said, God, you got your Corvette. We got this mock-up out there. Let's take some pictures. So I said, get in front of that Corvette. And let's just write stuff the shit out of this. And that's exactly what we did.
Good. Yeah. That's a great picture, though. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to share one memory that I had 7 years ago when Mr. John Young died behind your head there. They had a wake. I just moved here. That was a beautiful ceremony they had out there, and I haven't seen too many of those lately out there, Nick. Just a little comment. They didn't do much for some of the fallen guys. But they're going to do something for John. You can tell us about that later. But they had this beautiful thing out there for John Young. And he got up and did his own little eulogy, and it was basically that I got the call to be an astronaut. And a week later, I'm doing the last flying commitment I have to do as a Navy pilot.
Flying the Spirit of 76. It was a bicentennial F-4. The nickname of the airplane was Chicken Lickin'.
Okay.
And John had a helmet that had red, white, and blue stars and stripes on it, very much like the helmet that the guy wore in Easy Rider, the motorcycle movie.
Okay.
So that was he called it his Captain America helmet. So he was coming off the F-4, as you say, and
he says, I'm taking my gear off. The canopy comes off. I'm taking parachute. I'm hooking. And somebody's pulling up that metal stairway for me to come down. And so I sling my foot over and look down, and it's John Young at the bottom, pulling the ladder up for me to get down. And he yells up, Welcome to the astronaut corps, Big John.
Yeah, yeah.
He was about cried when he said that, and I got goosebumps telling our friends
And
that.
Big John had the honor of flying chase for STS-1 when
Yes.
he came back home.
I'm-
And you'll hear as the vehicle comes down closer and closer to the ground, and the main gear touches down, and then the nose gear touches down, and John's calling out all these altitudes. And when the nose gear touches down, you hear Big John say, "Welcome home, skipper." And so from the time that I first met John, he took over the astronaut encounter program. That's what I called him, skipper.
Yeah, oh, did you?
And who was it? I can't remember. One of the other astronauts was asking me about that. Why you call him skipper? I said, well, he's a Navy guy, and he's in charge of this program, so he's a skipper.
He's a skipper.
So the astronaut said to me, he said, well, wouldn't that make you Gilligan? So,
Okay.
you take this stuff.
Yeah, you do take that. You have to take that good with the bad there
Yeah.
when you deal with astronauts. So
Yeah,
that's a
but,
lot of fun.
It,
Nice tribute to what he's going to be missed. Tell us what you may know that they're going to do as a tribute to him.
I have not yet heard, but you're talking earlier about the tribute that he did for John Young that we did for several others. McBride was a big part of the driving force behind those public tributes. And I think since John has been gone, you've not seen them done in the way they had been done in the past. But John was very, very much tied to that because he knew what these folks had contributed and what they were responsible for, and he felt that they should be honored and that some words should be spoken about them. And so John, as I say, was a big part of arranging these public events whenever an astronaut would pass.
Today they usually put a beautiful wreath and a portrait there at the.
Well, at the Atlantis, they were shuttle astronauts, and then at the Hall of Fame, if they were Apollo or otherwise,
in there. But we had read that they planned Little John, his son John.
J2.
J2. Is that what y'all call him, J2?
J2.
Okay. He's a great friend, John. I know you're watching. God bless your family, and I know you know this guy real well there. And he's a great supporter, J2 is, of our museum, and he got to buy the Robbins Medal that was flown of his dad's mission off of Woody Spring.
Yeah,
because Woody Spring had auctioned his Robbins medals that he bought. So, and that wasn't cheap either. But no, they mentioned J2, his son mentioned that in October they'd mentioned that something was going to be done out the Space Center there, and hope they do a lasting memorial to somebody that really, I think, represented that facility
he didn't
as an astronaut beyond what they wanted him to.
He didn't just represent it; he embodied it.
Just like you do.
He was the heart of that AE operation. He really, really was, and I can't emphasize that enough. He cared so much about that operation, put so much of his energy into that operation, and as I said, made a point of being enrooted in that operation, so he knew what his guys needed. And that's typical of the Navy squadron commander or the Air Force squadron commander or what have you. You take care of your guys first, and you make sure you know what they need.
Yeah, I love that hands-on.
He took care of his guys.
A CEO, in a sense, that wants to come down and get his hands dirty with what's going on there.
On the shop floor. Sure, that's where it counts.
That's awesome. So we know that y'all enjoying this. Good morning to you, Cliff Watson in Australia, having a brekkie there. And Dave Stangy's saying, because he worked in the automotive industry, he said, I designed that color on the Corvette.
Oh,
okay,
cool.
All right, well, and Tom Celentano says Lousma ran for Senate from Michigan in 1984. I tell you, we got the smartest group of people.
Well, they're out there watching, I'll tell you. That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah,
getting fact checked all around the world.
That's right. Great photos and great stories. Thanks, Nick. Says a guy you need to meet, Mitch Rothman. He has a Facebook page. called NASA Manned Space,
Hmm.
and he's strictly a Facebook for Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and
Oh, all right.
ASTP.
Well done.
And
Very good.
he is real, and you need to meet him.
Yeah,
He's a great historian,
love to.
and has contributed to our museum. And Karen, we thank you for that, Mitch, and your wife Paula, on there. So, well, let's have a little bit of fun here with Nick Thomas. I'm calling it Nick's movie niche. Okay, where he chose, and then maybe I'll do a movie, and he can always do one, because we want your. Why else? Why would you want to have the show without him, right, on this? So
It was, again, such a wonderful idea from Dave Stange to come
yeah,
up with this. And so for today, I've chosen two movies, one of which is a picture based on fact, and the other one is a drama using the space program as a background. So
Marooned.
the Marooned. So
Yep.
we want to kind of talk about the differences between those films. So
All
let's
right.
go ahead and start with Apollo 13, acknowledged by every astronaut that I know as the gold standard in space movies. You ask any astronaut what was the best space movie ever made by Hollywood, and they'll tell you hands down it was Apollo 13, except for Sam Gaymar, who will tell you the best space movie was Spaceballs by Mel Brooks. But, you know, that's Sammy.
Spaceballs. Okay.
But every astronaut acknowledges Apollo 13 as being the gold standard. And a large part of that was the commitment by Ron Howard and Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon and the third actor, forgive me, who played Fred Hayes. All three of them were space
Marty,
fans.
give me my. I didn't pull my notes off of the.
All three of these guys were dedicated space fans, and it was their dedication to getting this right in every single way that led to the wonderful realism that we have in this motion picture. The only way to do honor was not only to tell the story, but to tell it as factually and as accurately as possible. And we have, Bill Paxton played Fred Hayes. We have those people to thank for the realism and the incredible power of this movie. And I think the thing that stands out to me about this movie is all of us, space fans as we are, we know the story, we know how it ends, but still, by the time of that ending, we're still on the edge of our seat, wondering if those parachutes are going to deploy or not. I had the privilege of seeing the premiere of this film in Cocoa Beach, sitting alongside of Fred Hayes.
Oh, did you?
And
really?
we watched it together. And when it was all over, I turned to him. I said, "Fred, what did you think?" He says, "I liked it." He said, "I especially liked the ending." I said, I bet you did." But
wow, that's pretty nice.
the one thing, and everybody talks about what did they get wrong? What did they miss? Well, there were a couple of things, a couple of minor things. You had some Hollywood conflict in there in the limb where they were saying, "What did you do? When did you push that button?" And as all the guys will tell you, that didn't happen. They didn't have that conversation because you didn't have time for that sort of thing. But what Fred and I caught first out of the gate was that scene where they're in the vehicle assembly building, and in the background, the Saturn V is being stacked, and the S4B is being brought down onto the second stage, and it contacts and it goes clong. And Fred and I didn't say a word, but we turned around and we looked at each other. And later on, I told Fred, I said, Ron Howard just lost every crane operator in the VAB. But, those are just quibbles compared to what they got right. You have the three astronauts all being portrayed brilliantly. Of course, Tom Hanks is Jim Lovell. We see him here in the left seat during the launch phase. Bill Paxton again as Fred Hayes, the lunar module pilot. And then finally, Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert. Now, one of the things I do take exception with in the motion picture was the portrayal of Jack Swigert. Now, you'll see in so many scenes, and you see a little bit of it here, apparent apprehension on the part of Jack Swigert. As though it's like, God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this right, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Jack Swigert was known as one of the only astronauts who went to Deke Slayton when he was chosen and said, I want to be a command module pilot. And he knew that spacecraft inside and out. And if you wanted someone in that seat during an accident like that, you wanted Jack Swigert. So I think again, this is a little bit of Hollywood, a little bit of conflict, a little spilkus on the part of Hollywood wanting to make the film more interesting, and I can understand that. But there was nothing apprehensive about Jack Swigert on this crew. He was ready. He went mano a mano with the sim soups in that command module before he flew. I think they had a 12-hour marathon simulator session, and Jack didn't make one mistake. So I think that's probably the only quibble that I have with the picture.
Well, in reality, also, Fred Hayes was the expert point person on the lunar module
Yeah,
for
yeah,
Grumman.
sure.
So there you had the people, two astronauts that knew the
You know,
most
if you're
about
going to
it.
have people on board an accident like that, by God, you have the
Yeah.
right people,
And
because
then
they're
a
all
terrific commander. I mean, again,
yeah.
all of them pretty humble too. People
Sure.
out there. The master alarm there.
Yeah, and of the reaction to it, here we see.
You had a red in there for a reason. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, and you'll see in another picture that I have of the panel here. This is just one small example. You know, a shot that's only seen for a second, but you'll see in a later shot of the caution warning panel, the attention to detail that was paid to getting all this realism just right. The simulator of that command module was just perfect in every way.
Looking for that. I guess
We'll get to that later. Let's get back on track. But the idea of having that vehicle as accurate as possible, and the cast to get in that vehicle, that simulator, and to know where those switches are and what they did and so forth. And by golly, I'm sure that you could put any of those guys inside. Well, we've lost Bill Paxton, unfortunately, but you could put those guys in that simulator, and you could point to a panel and say, what does this switch do? He probably could have told you. And he could have told you what part of the panel he was responsible for during launch, although Jack was a command module pilot, Fred was a systems engineer during launch, so he sat on the right side of the vehicle responsible for the electrical support systems and so forth, and being able to call out any situations that came up. But I'm sure that those astronauts were so well grounded in this program that they knew that vehicle quite well.
Quite a blockbuster, released June 30th, 1995 in North America. And then Robert Law, you saw it September 22nd, 95 in the UK. I love this. Apollo 13 was released on VHS November 1995 and on Laserdisc the following week.
VH what?
Yeah. Blockbuster. They used to have a big blimp over college football stadiums.
Yep.
Of course, they've had anniversary issues along the way on there. And let's see, it costs, I always like looking at that. It cost $52 million to make back in 1995.
What did it earn?
In the box office, $355 million.
Okay.
So it's made $300 million.
Well,
52 million though in 95. I'm going, these are A-list actors that usually today get $20 million a movie. So it looks like they got the cast at a pretty good price. I wanted to interject this while I turn Nick loose. Nick, aspiring actor, spent 5 years in New York City in the trenches there as an actor. So you'll value his insight to these movies even more, just not as a space geek, but as a thespian wanting to be on stage, and you understand the chops it took to act some of this out.
And the combined work of the director, the producers, the music score, cinematography, production values, and so forth, it all comes together. It is such a highly collaborative effort. It takes a long time. You can spend 4 days shooting a scene that'll last less than 20 seconds on the screen, and I know because I've done that. So the work that goes into all this, I will tell you that those folks do earn their money. They really, really do.
Yeah, let's go on here. Of course, there was a lot of publicity about this. We see things all the time for the release out there.
I think the only downside of this motion picture is that it is so popular that everybody who comes to astronaut encounter or to chat with an astronaut, they says, were there any big problems on your flight? And it's the movie has been so far-reaching that a lot of people in the general public think that every other shuttle mission had probably some kind of an Apollo 13 moment, and it didn't. You know, it's Apollo 13 went on to highlight this problem and how we got out of it and the hard work that it took to get out of it. But then another movie, another series that we'll come to later, From the Earth to the Moon, went back and showed you the program and the whole big picture. We had some stunning successes, of course, out the program. But, you know, I sometimes think Hollywood loves a failure because that's where all the drama is. So they gravitated toward Apollo 13, rightfully so, because there are a lot of people out there who didn't know about this, that this happened during the Apollo program. And it was so valuable in raising the awareness among the young people, not only of today's space program, but how we got this done back in the old days. You know, our computer on board that vehicle was 64K.
Yeah.
64K got us to the moon and got us back. You tell that to the kids now, and it's like, God, I got more power in my watch. Yeah, several times more power.
No, this card that my mom gave me for my birthday. Yeah. Of course, the Apollo 13 event was April 1970. So doing a movie 25 years after is exactly what Nick's talking about. A whole generation, you know, didn't live this. But boy, we did.
Now they're brought into it, and
we'll talk about that another day.
Yeah, Ed Harris is flight director Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz, of course, the backbone of this whole operation. He was on console when it happened, but then came off console to run the Tiger team that was going to bring this crew back home. And Gene Kranz, the best description I ever heard of Gene Kranz was that, you know, he had that very angular face and that very, very sharp look, and he had the haircut and so forth. And one person said that Gene looked like a member of a particularly bloodthirsty branch of the armed services. But he was a guy who in real life wore his heart on his sleeve. He'd start his morning listening to John Philip Sousa music. That's how he got himself pumped up. And he was and still is just a red, white, and blue patriot. And like a lot of the World War II veterans, you talk to Gene Kranz about what he did. He says, hey, we're just doing our job. And that's the guy you want in the hot seat when things go wrong.
Yeah. I'd say many of our watchers today, viewers, have met Mr. Kranz at varied events. And it's a good thing that he's freely sharing, you know, while he's healthy, the experience.
He also spent many years after he left NASA as a flight engineer on board a B-17 that flew around the country to air shows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was by the way, he was a fighter pilot. He was an F-86 pilot in the Korean War, so he had his chops.
Those F-86. I wonder whose wingman he was back in that day. All right, there's
Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, and of course Fred, the lunar module pilot. And as they go around the moon on that free return trajectory, Fred and Jack look at the window and they're looking at all the spots on the moon, and Jim is kind of hanging back, and they say, Jim, you want to come see this? And Jim said, I've seen it. And of course Jim had the extra emotional burden of, you know, gee, he was this close again, but he was not going to see the touchdown on the surface. But again, I think the two actors, Kevin Bacon and Bill Paxton, did a marvelous job with their roles. There was some mention or some allusion to the fact that Jack was, shall we say, a happy-go-lucky bachelor, and there was a great story about Jack Swigert. And it was a legend in the astronaut office during Apollo, and it was called Swigert's March to the Sea. And Jack was going to leave California. He was going to leave from California on a Friday and fly across the country to the East Coast, land there on Sunday, and then come back Monday for the Monday morning meeting. Well, along the way, of course, you have to stop and you have to refuel here and there as you're going across country. And Jack had literally had a girlfriend in every port. Every place where he'd stop for fuel, there was a friend waiting for him. And that next Monday morning meeting, everybody was in the office wanting to see if Jack showed up, if he was still alive after Swiggert's March to the Sea.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a good one there. Robert Law, by the way, is reminding us he still has a restored VCR
Ah,
Sharp that he records
mhm.
space missions on. So
Yeah.
there you go. Keep those memories any way you want. The
Keeping
big
that
solar flare is going to wipe out all that electrical
Yeah,
data.
keeping that
one day
keeping
in
that
there.
technology
So
alive.
we're enjoying this with Nick Thomas talking about Apollo 13. We're going to talk about Marooned here in just a minute. But I got so many questions I could say about Apollo 13. I'm going to just stick to the movie.
One of the other wonderful segments in this motion picture was the lead up to the launch as the guys were in the suit up room getting suited up. And it was just wonderful. The way Ron Howard shot it, it was you could feel the pulse speed of this movie begin to increase the closer and closer you got to launch. And Ron Howard played this one like a symphony conductor, the way he orchestrated the emotions starting in the suit up room, then going out to the pad, getting in the spacecraft, the final countdown, and the launch. The music, of course, also tracked this very well. So again, we see the fruits of a very collaborative effort in this motion picture.
The
And
soundtrack actually won an Oscar.
yeah,
The
yeah.
soundtrack and the editing won an
Mhm.
Oscar, but the other awards shows actually made it the picture of the year.
Yeah.
The Academy
Golden
Awards
Globes
didn't, but
and, Golden Globes.
it
and
was
some of the others. Sure.
who played Krantz.
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris won Best Actor
Mhm.
in a couple of those
Yeah.
other award things there. So
Well, I think Hollywood writ large in the way of the Oscars, uh, they don't usually pay, I don't think, a lot of shall we say, attention or service to the films that are, shall we say, more patriotic. And
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
yeah, let's say exactly.
This picture,
They
I
weren't-
put this picture in for a specific reason. Now, this is an image that everybody points to in the movie where they're getting strapped in, and the suit techs put their foot on your shoulder and yank that strap up, and it's and they all flinch and they see that. Do they really do that? They do. Well, I talked to Al Warden, command module pilot for Apollo 15, and he said, "You bet, by God, that's exactly what they did. They jammed their foot on your shoulder and they pulled that harness as tight as they could," because he saw later on in the staging sequence from stage 1 to stage 2, by God, you were thrown against those straps at staging and then back in your seat when the S2 ignited. So yeah, you had to have those straps as tight as possible. So the answer to that question, yes, they did. By God, that's exactly how they strapped you into that command module. And again, props to Ron Howard for bringing that forward.
Well,
Here
you
again-
mentioned that. I want to, before you
Yeah.
get to that, I wanted to ask you the question: what do you think of Opie as a director? He's done
there's
some amazing
nothing like him.
Yeah.
He's one of the best things to come along as far as direction's concerned. And I'll tell you,
Backdraft. Did you ever watch that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Now, the reason for his success has been that he's just a down-to-earth, level-headed guy. And I give credit to his father, Rance Howard, and to his mother, who raised him as a child when he was doing Andy Griffith, and raised him to be a young man of substance. Don't get into this Hollywood, you're not a star or anything like that. They kept him grounded for those very important formative years. And we've seen instances where that was not done by the parents. And we've seen the train wrecks
Yeah.
that have resulted as a part of that. But Ron Howard came through that whole experience with a level head on his shoulders, a lot of talent, because he just soaked it up when he was on the set of the Andy Griffith Show. He just soaked up everything that was going on, learned about camera work and sound and post-production and editing and so forth. He took all that in. So subsequently, when he started directing, and I think the first picture he directed was a potboiler called Eat My Dust. He directed and starred in it. That's where he cut his teeth. But he went on, as you say, to make some really, really valuable and timeless motion pictures. So
Did you meet him personally in the premiere?
I'm trying to remember when the guys came to Kennedy Space Center to learn the lay of the land and get their orientation. I briefly saw him as we were passing from one building to the other, but didn't get a chance. Just enough to say hello and good luck.
Well, I wanted to interject that a real underrated director. I guess he's really not because of the
Yeah.
success he's had. He did a Formula One movie that
But he
not
was
many
not
people
he
watched.
was
But
he was not an overnight success.
right,
Yeah.
there you go.
This
So
picture of the caution and warning panel, I love this picture because you can identify all the things that have gone wrong. Fuel cell 1 is offline, fuel cell 3 is offline. You've got O2 flow rate high. You see all the problems that they had on that vehicle when that explosion happened. And again, this is an illustration of the attention to detail. I'll say the love for detail that this whole team had for this program. They respected it so highly, as I say, that their big objective was let's get it right. The way to do honor to this program is to get it right, and that's exactly what they did.
Marty, you've got a question from one of our viewers on that UCX family microphone.
Yeah, Gary Gerald's asking, Nick, were the spacesuits real?
No, they were not real. The actual spacesuits, I had the privilege of trying on Alan Shepard's practice suit
Really?
at KSC. And that thing, let's see, the shuttle launch and entry suits weighed about 70 pounds. These Apollo suits, the actual Apollo suits, probably weighed on the order of 90 pounds. And when you put one on, you had to be fit just to be able to move in that damn thing on Earth. So these were excellent representations, but no, they were not the actual. They were not the actual suit.
Thank you for your question, Gary. You got one last picture there of the star, Tom Hanks.
Again, the performances and everything across the board, from performances to camera work to direction, music, and so forth, everything was focused. And I think that's the word that I come up with when I see this particular image of Tom Hanks. And as a lot of you know, the reason they were able to get those zero-G effects so well was because many of those scenes were shot in the zero-G airplane in the Vomit Comet. And of course, you only got 20 seconds at a time of that. So when the cast was up there in the Vomit Comet, they would have a couple of parabolas to rehearse it, and then they'd shoot on the third or the fourth parabola. And that's not easy. I mean, rehearsal and shooting takes a lot of time, but now you're told, okay, you can have 20 seconds to do this, have at it. So that was a lot of pressure that they were working under, but they made it look so effortless. When you see it on the screen, it just comes across so well and so naturally. But again, that's a testament, again, to the professionalism of the director, the camera crew, sound people, and the actors.
We had Terry White, the garage mechanic, so to speak, for the shuttle, talking about the Vomit Comet last week. And I think it's $250,000 for 29 people, 15 loops in there. But I mean, and what he's saying about rehearsing and then recording, assuming nobody's got their face in a barf bag, you know.
Yeah, that's true. You got to worry about that too.
So,
yeah.
Well, what final comments about Apollo 13? I got my little producer's notes in there. You all know the website Rotten Tomatoes, I suppose. 96% of the 97 critic reviews are positive, giving it an overall 8.2 out of 10.
Yeah.
So that's high numbers for a.
They got it right. The film is timeless. It's entertaining and educational all at the same time. And like I say, for the young people, they get a chance to see what it was like back in the days of Apollo and what went into all this and the work between the crew and mission control and so forth. But for us older people who had the privilege, if you will, of experiencing this when it happened, it still brings back all those emotions that we felt when it was going on. When we first heard of the accident, we first heard of the plans that were being put forward to bring the guys back home. And during Apollo 13, it seemed NASA was having a press conference about every 5 hours. I mean, they made it a point to keep the public informed on what was going every step of the way. I don't see that so much now, but I'll leave it at that.
Of interest note is it surpassed the other Tom Hanks movie, Forrest Gump, for having the largest opening weekend of a Tom Hanks film. And within 5 days, it had become the second highest 5-day opener of all time.
All in
So,
all, not a bad film to hang your
No.
hat on.
that's right. And it seems like TBS has it on about 5 times a year.
Yeah.
So I'm clicking around there. So I always have to stop by and see something on there. So we're going to go on to another movie here with Nick Thomas here. Thank you, Nick. We're having a good time here. Let me go to there we go. Marooned from
Marooned.
1969. And
Yeah. This now this is a film, a drama, that simply utilizes the space program as a backdrop.
the book, based on the book by
Marty
Martin
Caden.
Caden,
Yeah.
that we talked about Martin Caden with Jim Lewis on Stay Curious, raising money for a documentary on him. So there's the paperback.
So
Take it away, Nick.
This film, as I say, a drama utilizing the space program as a backdrop. And the plot lines in the broad strokes are the fact that a crew goes up to an orbiting laboratory, ostensibly a Skylab type laboratory. They spent 3 months up there, and during the 3-month period, they notice the team on the ground notices a lot of degradation in the crew's ability, and they decide to bring them down somewhat early. But when they attempt to re-enter, they can't fire the surface propulsion system engine. And then they're also told they don't have enough delta V in the RCS engine to do an emergency backup procedure for a reentry. So they're going to have to try that again. Of course, the second try is also unsuccessful. So it then becomes a drama on how do we get these guys back home and how do we rescue them.
What a testosterone-laced active group of men actors.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
my gosh.
you know,
Some
the
of
direct-
some of the
The director, John Sturgis, was a guy who directed The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven. So yeah, a lot of testosterone, and I for one am all for it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm very pro testosterone. I'll have
There you
know.
go.
Yeah.
Me too. Gregory Peck, just
Oh,
an
yeah,
icon
yeah,
that'll go
yeah.
on, be known for 100 years from now, as well as Gene Hackman, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Richard Crenna, David Jansen, James
Jansen,
Franciscus, all had great careers.
Now they all had some great roles within this picture too, the different characters. And here we see the crew during the launch phase with some interestingly designed helmets. But here they are headed uphill, and as the camera pans through the capsule, you'll see that it is very well laid out. It's the realism. The realism on Apollo 13 was a 10. I think the realism on this film was probably an 8. But here we see the crew in the command module. Obviously, a command module simulator. You see Richard Crenna down in the lower equipment bay next to the nav station, and the hatch with the circular window right behind Jane Franciscus' head, and everything's where it should be. And the procedures that are called out and that are described within the film are as accurate as I think they possibly could be. They didn't have the use of the vomit comet for this, so they actually used small platforms that would rotate and gyrate and give them the appearance of being floating in zero gravity. So that was the best you could do back then.
To set the date, this movie, the novel was written by Caden in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
The movie was released November 10th, 1969, right around the launch of Apollo 12.
And in the book, in Caden's book, it was a Mercury spacecraft with one person on board.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
The budget was, it was actually a box office flop. It cost $8 million, and the box office was $4 million through the weeks there. Anyway, I just want to point out the time frame there that we're looking at, and they brought it out. The film was still in release in April of 1970, not November 69, then April 70s, the Apollo 13 disaster. So they pulled it, depending on the outcome of Apollo 13, and then when they made it back safely, they released it to New York theaters again to make money. So you're going to give us some details of this great actor.
Our friend Gregory Peck there, just a magnificent actor and just the right guy to play the role of the chief of manned spaceflight. he was the focal point of this whole thing. And at first, after the second attempt to get the vehicle down, he sits down with the other team members and basically writes the crew off and says, the president's gonna go on the air if necessary and say the program should continue and tribute to the men and so forth and so on. So he's already writing their obituary. But the chief astronaut, played by David Jansen, an astronaut named Ted Dougherty, directly challenges him on this and basically tells him, said, 3 of your guys are up there dying, and you better do something about getting them back. And Gregory Peck goes through by the book, this is why we can't do it, this is why we can't do it, this is why we can't do it because of this, that, and the other. And Jansen keeps saying, we'll launch a rescue vehicle in 48 hours. And Peck just basically leaves it at that. But when he's in transit, Peck gets a call from the President of the United States saying, we've got to save these guys. We've got to bring these guys back. Let me know what you need, and you've got it. So Peck then turns the corner, if you will, and becomes the charging force behind getting this rescue shot off the ground. And here we see Gregory Peck, and just behind him is Frank Marth, a wonderful actor. And they're in the launch control of the Cape Canaveral, getting ready to launch David Jansen and the rescue vehicle from Pad 40. As I mentioned to you fellas earlier, this was the first major motion picture shot on Cape Canaveral. Frank Marth, David Jansen, and Gregory Peck came out to Pad 40, and they shot the scene where the rescue vehicle is delivered, and then Gregory Peck does a walk down on Pad 40, and it was the first time that we did the Hollywood thing out here at Cape Canaveral. And one of the people who worked for Technicolor, who was our contractor at the time for film and videotape and so forth, he is an extra playing one of the technicians in the camera crew. He's got a beard and a crew cut. But I got a chance to talk to him when I came on board. We shared some stories about the shoot on Marooned on Cape Canaveral.
Those of you who don't know this movie, I recently watched it on Roku Pluto, I believe, for free on there. And Dave Stange, with his granddaughter Mia watching, he has a suggestion that Countdown is another classic space movie.
Well,
and
as a
Nick and
matter
I
of fact,
did
we
talk
talked about that,
Countdown.
and Countdown is going to be our B film when we come back to this format in a few months.
Good.
So yeah, we're definitely going to talk about Countdown with Robert Duvall and James Caan. So
Yeah.
look forward to that.
And I found that on Roku, so I can watch that because it refreshed my mind right there.
Dave Jansen here playing the chief astronaut, Ted Dougherty, and he is, in his words, kludging up a simulator of the XRV, getting ready to launch this rescue shot.
Looks pretty
And
good
of
to me,
course
the
the-
background there and stuff for accuracy.
And of course, the whole premise of getting this thing off the ground so quickly, you're going to have to take a lot of shortcuts and compromise on safety. And in one scene, they go over the timeline, and Frank Marth tells Gregory Peck, we got so many checks we got to do, we can only take so much time to do this. And Gregory Peck goes through the checklist with his pencil and big X here, another page, big X here, 3 more pages, big X. He says, okay, that's how you're going to do it. Now, Colonel, you've got backup systems put into your all your vehicles. Now you're going to find out if they work.
Very good there. All right. There's another.
Richard Crenna is Jim Pruitt, who is the mission commander, and they add a lot of depth to these characters. Pruitt, as the crew settles in for the wait, they have a chance to talk about things other than the problem, and Pruitt talks about the fact that he never saved enough money in this business, didn't understand how these other pilots were able to pull together so much, and he didn't have a dime. And he said, I'll tell you another thing, said I'll be too old for the Mars shot because I'm just gonna be too old. I'll never get it. And this is basically knew it was gonna be his last flight going into it. But he does a good job of playing the, shall we say, the war-weary veteran. Here we have James Franciscus as the scientist assigned to the flight. Very analytical, just very focused on what he has to do, which is observing systems under stress. And he just doesn't get rattled by anything. And that proves a little resentment on the part of Pruitt and Lloyd, who are both professional pilots. And at some point, I think Jim Pruitt snarks at James Franciscus, and he says, why don't you figure out a way to get us down? And Franciscus laughs and he says, no, I rely on the pilot to get me places. And that was very reflective of the pilot-scientist divide, if you will, that was in the astronaut office. Very well executed.
Like Nick says, a lot of character development,
Oh, yeah,
the
very much,
psychology of
Yeah.
how they feel.
Yeah.
And this whole premise is they're bringing them back early because they sense Gene Hackman's a little disturbed.
Yeah, well, Gene Hackman, again, plays a veteran astronaut who was also a former fighter pilot and test pilot. Pressure is a funny thing. Some guys focus and some guys fold. And you don't always know when and where the seam is going to pop. And here we had Buzz Lloyd, who was an excellent pilot in every way, but that 3 months on orbit just kind of wore him down. So unfortunately, when the crisis came, he was not emotionally equipped to deal with it. Now, God bless Gene Hackman. He took a lot of flack for this role because he was the cowardly astronaut. He wasn't the cowardly astronaut. He was a guy who simply passed his point, his limit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was very well done, very well performed. Hackman at this time, I think he'd already done Bonnie and Clyde, but he hadn't done the French Connection yet. So he was just on the verge of stardom. And I think he did a wonderful job with that role. He was the one who the seam blew, and he seemed to panic at everything that went wrong, and it simply got worse and worse as you went on. But you just don't know. None of us know where our seam is and where that seam is going to blow and what's going to cause it to blow.
Yeah, I'm positive Bonnie and Clyde was right before this. What a movie that
Oh
was
yeah,
growing up.
yeah.
Marty, you got a question?
You can wait till the end.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. There.
The motion picture Marooned won an Academy Award for special effects.
Mm-hmm.
And here we see James Franciscus in the open hatch as the sun comes over the Earth's limb. I think for the technology that there was at the time, it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped and think what we could do with this scene with today's technology. But nevertheless, I think they got it as right as they possibly could. And all three guys during the sunrise, they all react to the grandeur and the beauty of it. And typical, they don't say anything about it. It's just that Franciscus says, Buzz, how about some work? And so they get right to work. But they're all awestruck by it. They're all affected by it. But it wasn't the kind of thing that was, you didn't sit there and analyze it and talk about it. You just, boy, that's beautiful. Okay, what's next on the checklist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're hoping about 4 days. Jared Isaacman will be looking at
Oh,
that view
yeah,
on the
yeah.
spacewalk.
Very
That's
excited about Jared's flight, about the Polaris Dawn.
Yeah.
And the first that we're going to make. And I was thinking about that mission this morning, and I was thinking about McBride. And I was thinking, God, I said, John would have given his left arm to be on the left seat in this on this flight, doing so many new things and just a grand adventure. And getting back to John for a moment, test pilot, astronaut, all the rest. But in his heart, I suspect John was a bit of a buccaneer. I see John on the ship, on the big sail ship, standing on the bow with the sextant and the telescope. John had a certain amount of Horatio Hornblower in him. Another character played by Gregory Peck, by the way.
There you go. Yeah.
But if you had to
not
put
Ahab.
if you had to put all the weights on the scale as to what made John tick, I think one of the small weights on there that would slightly tip the balance was adventure.
Remembering his good friend John McBride.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. Not at all, Nick. Not at all.
What do we have next?
We just have a couple last slides there. He didn't give away too much of the plot here. There's a Russian angle into this, and but go check this movie out.
Well, here's
Yeah.
Franciscus reacting to that sunrise, and you can see the look on his face. And I think again, the actors did a very good job of expressing that sense of seeing the grandeur of the sunrise for the maybe well for Franciscus's character it was his first time. Buzz had seen it before, and Jim Lloyd had seen it before, but this was Stoney's first time to see the rise of the sun from Earth orbit, and I think it was very, very well done.
Now you have a bit of a surprise slide. You said here.
Yeah,
Nick.
I'm proud to say I have a personal connection with this motion picture. The fellow you see here is a reporter in the film, and the character's name is Cannon. And he's kind of a snarky, cynical, in your face kind of, well, what are you going to do to get these guys down? And can you really do it? And so forth. So, he's your typical character you're going to have in a situation like this, the naysayer, or whatever you want to call him. The actor's name is Vincent Van Lin. And back in the early 80s, I was working on a motion picture as an extra called Daniel with Timothy Hutton. And in Daniel, I was an extra, and I drove a 1947 Superior Cadillac in a funeral scene at a cemetery. And I will tell you that you have not lived until you started your day at 5:30 a.m. in a Jewish cemetery in Long Island on a Sunday morning. So anyway, we're shooting the scene, and we're getting all the setups and so forth. And again, there's a lot of waiting and milling around involved. And as I'm walking through with the other extras, I turn around and I look, and I see Vincent Van Lin. I recognize him from his work because I'd seen so many of his pictures. And he was just one of those journeyman actors. You see him all the time, but you don't know his name. So I went over and introduced myself and told him, I said, I enjoyed your work over the years. So we talked a while about, what it was like to be a working actor, and just kind of hitting the bricks and going from job to job and so forth. He was from Long Island, and God, he had that Long Island accent, I hope to tell you. But he was a wonderful guy, very, very nice guy. And we lost him in the early 2000s, I think it was. But while not a famous actor, not an actor who's got his footprints in the Walk of Fame or anything like that, he was one of those working actors, always had a job going. He had, as a matter of fact, he was in 2 of the Matt Helm movies. The second one he was in was called The Wrecking Crew, and he had a scene with Sharon Tate in that film. He plays the police officer that comes up after the car wreck and questions Sharon Tate, and they had this very funny scene together. So again, to our home audience here, that's Vincent Van Lin. Keep your eye out for him, because now that you know him, I'm sure Vincent Van Lin.
Vincent Van Lin.
Right.
Okay.
And so now that you know him, I think you'll probably see him from time to time. You'll be a little more tuned at seeing him in some of
Probably
these
on Perry Mason.
quick scenes. Yeah, I'm sure he did Perry Mason. Everybody did Perry Mason back in those days. Yeah.
Back in there.
So,
Well, that's a nice little side note there, Nick, for sure. And there I was thinking of whatever I thought about escaped me there. But thank you, Nick Thomas here.
Yeah,
We've
you
had
bet.
a beautiful Stay Curious here, extend a little bit longer to for Nick's beautiful tribute to his friend John McBride. Marty?
Yeah, 2 questions. Dean Babcock is asking, Nick, have any astronauts remarked about the movie First Man?
A few of us have talked about it. We don't like it. We think it's a very dark portrayal of Neil Armstrong. You just had to meet Neil Armstrong to know that he was not the character that was portrayed in that motion picture.
No, they didn't have him with a beer in his hand at a polka festival in central Ohio, where he was known to go a
They
lot. It's
dwelt.
just,
They seem to dwell on this, what I would refer to as a very negative portrayal
Yeah.
of Neil Armstrong, and he was not a demonstrative guy, but neither was he this brooding, down character that they show in this film. And the film, I think, the word that I associate with that film is relentlessly dark. And no, I didn't care for it. And the astronauts I've spoken to, particularly the ones who met Neil Armstrong, they didn't have anything good to say about it either.
Marty?
Yeah, Nick, I'm sorry, Steve Yoakum is asking, speaking Mars, how about The Martian?
Oh God, all the guys love The Martian, and I think
We ought to do the Martian and countdown next time we do
the
this.
majority of the guys who talk about The Martian talk about the movie and the book, and they're all agreed that they like the book more because the book goes into a lot more detail.
Yeah, I love
And
the
they
book.
say that that detail that's expressed in the book is very, very accurate. The one thing that they express on the down check side of the movie is where he he cuts the finger of his glove on a spacesuit to propel him to the vehicle or whatever. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like we all just kind of bury our hands in our head in our hands when we see that part. But
yeah.
um, all the guys are highly positive about that film. But as I say, most especially about the book.
Yeah, the book is good. Had a lot of good details
Mhm.
in there that we won't go into if you read The Martian, the book, or it's a good books on tape too if you're traveling somewhere. Thank you to Steve Jokums for suggesting that. Uh, and we're going to say thank you all for watching today. Really enjoyed today's show. Nick's perspective, like I said, comes from that of an actor that did these sort of things, and we will do
Well,
this again.
if you want to do a retrospective of my acting career, bring a magnifying glass and a stopwatch because it goes by real fast.
And you know what? That's one of those things that somebody knew better than you did. All right, Mr. 4 decades at the Space Center doing what you love.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's me too. I thought I
Somebody
was
was
going to
somebody
work.
was looking out for me.
And Nick and I were at New York at the same time. I was carrying a camera around, stringer for the Associated Press, Newsweek, Sports Illustrated, who'd ever
Yeah.
let me just show up and take some pictures somewhere. So that's always fun to talk about that experience with you, Nick. Well, thank you all for watching today. We have got some guests lined up for the rest of the week. I haven't confirmed Tuesday's guest, but Wednesday, Bert Dick of the National Space Society is going to be here. They have their offices there at the Astronaut Memorial offices there on the
Mhm.
Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex campus. So we got it all lined up for the week here. So we're just appreciative that you're all starting your week with us. All you wonderful regulars out there, thank you. Spread the word that we are. Keep numbers keep going up, Nick. We actually got a check for $100 from YouTube for
Mhm.
doing this show. So that's important to our nonprofit to get this kind of input from you all. So, Nick, thanks a lot for a
Okay.
great job
Thank you very much,
sharing
Mark.
these
Appreciate
one of a
it.
kind stories that you're only going to hear from Nick Thomas. And we're proud that you're a friend of our museum and wanting to share this. So I think I gave a shout out to everybody that we were talking, except Bill Whiting. Didn't say hi to Bill
Hello,
Whiting
Bill.
up there. He's still up in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And but don't worry, we're going to break into your condo and watch the launch at 3:30 today. Try and stop us. No, I'm just joking.
We'll watch
I'm
it.
joking.
We'll,
I'm joking.
We'll watch it for you.
Yeah, there you go. So everybody, thank you, Marty, for a great job on Streamlabs there. Marty will be out there seeing you back at work, getting something
Okay.
autographed, I'm sure, as Marty does that to get things like I do, autographed for the museum, so we can have things of astronauts to either gift or sell to you. So until the next time, I'm thanking Nick Thomas for educating you about those movies and Mr. John McBride. And I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.